Hey everyone! If you're like me, those perimenopause symptoms are driving you crazy. Well, I've got a little help for you. All you need to do is go to my midlifewithcourage.com website, and a little box is going to pop up that's going to ask you if you'd like to get my free ebook called Balancing Your Hormones. It's a short little guide with tips that you can use throughout the day, super easy, to help you balance out those hormones through the things that you do. So check it out, midlifewithcourage.com. Now let's get back to the show. You are listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. This is where women in midlife come for inspiration, motivation, and sometimes a little education to help them flourish after 40. Don't forget to hit that follow button so that you don't miss any episodes. Now let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Midlife with Courage. I am Kim Benoit, your host. Today, I have a lovely guest. Her name is Jaime Townzen. Welcome to the podcast, Jaime.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. I know you have a beautiful story that you want to share with our listeners. So, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and where you are in the world.
Oh, well, for the most part, I'm in Southern California and I spend the bulk of my time watercolor painting and writing. And I've been a stay-at-home mom. My oldest is 18 and about to leave for college, and my youngest
Ah.
is 16. So I spend a lot of time with my girls and doing the mom thing.
Well, they always say, like, oh, the kids need you at home, which they do, but I think sometimes teenagers need us more than the little ones.
I absolutely agree. And my husband and I are both the youngest in our family. So we have a dozen nieces and nephews that are older than our kids. And we watched that over the years, that even as they struggled with having open dialogues with their own parents, they would come and stay with us because they could talk to the younger, cooler aunt and uncle about what they were going through. And I really wanted to make sure that as our kids grew up, they would know that, of course, we hope they would always talk to us, but that they
Mhm.
have a lot of adults around them.
Nice.
So I have my close girlfriends that I call my sister wives as a little joke, because we do. We sort of co-parent our kids, and when they don't want to talk to us, they will go talk to them. And I think it's
Nice.
so important for teenagers to have somebody to be close to when they're struggling.
Yes. So let's kind of jump in a little bit. Why don't you first tell us about a time in your life when you felt courageous or you showed courage?
I know that this is a common question you ask your guests, and so I wanted to think about it. I think so many of us have to be courageous on every single day of our lives, and I think the biggest thing is not letting ourselves be the victim when something happens that we don't expect. So in my case, the first thing that comes to mind is when my kids were 2 and 4, my father was working as a contractor for a short time in upstate Pennsylvania on the other side of the country just to keep an income for his household. And he had a major stroke. And I had never been to where he was working. It was January. And I got on a plane and I navigated my way to his hospital and to his
Oh,
apartment that he was staying in at the time. And I sat there and I talked with him and I walked him through getting his speech back over the course of the next few days, because I have a few friends who are speech therapists, and they said like the most important thing is getting him to want to express words and try to express words and try to write again. And so I just sat there doing that for the next 3 days and, had to trust that my babies back home were being cared for. And like,
ah,
I just dropped everything. And I think so often we don't consider those times to be courageous, but they are, because showing up for the people we love are the most important ways we can be courageous in life.
I know you talk about unexpected caregiving. Is that the start of it?
Mhm.
Let's tell us about your story.
When I talk about what led me to where I am today, I don't even really start that early, but you're right. And in some ways, it was that early. I'm on the young end of the Gen X group, and we have, the aging boomer parents at this point. And I had 4 parents. My parents split up and remarried when I was very young. So I, was raised by 4 parents. And in 2014, I started to plan to go back to work. I thought that I was finally, after my first child was born in 2007 and my second child was born at the end of 2008. And so by 2014, they were both in kindergarten. And I thought, okay, I can finally start doing what I had set out for my own goals in life again, because they're both in school full time. I can go back to work. And a series of events that started with the person who owned the house we were renting needed us to move. And then 2 weeks before we moved, my grandmother passed away, who I was very close to.
Hmm.
And then 2 days before we moved, my father-in-law very unexpectedly had a heart attack and passed away. And so my husband had to fly to be with his mother to plan his father's funeral. And I had to move our children to a whole new city, a whole new school district.
Wow.
I had to coordinate all of the back and forth of getting our belongings into the new house while he was not with me. And then 4 days after we moved, we all had to go up for the funeral. And that was just really hard. That first month, really, of my youngest being in kindergarten was just like this whirlwind of, wait, what is going on? Why is life doing this to us? And so I remember sitting on the front stoop of our new house and like just sobbing when I found out about my father-in-law passing away, because I was there for the inspection,
Mhm.
and thinking, what are we doing? I don't have any friends here. I don't have any community here. We don't have a church here. I don't know any of their teachers. I don't know anything. How will we get through this? And sadly, that was the next 10 years, really, of 6 years of death after death after death. So I lost another grandmother in February. And then my stepfather had Parkinson's, and my stepsister had ALS, and she passed away in 2019 at age 50. So between 2014 and 2019, I was really trying to help with her own children's caregiving as well. I lived close enough that I could help as much as possible.
Mhm.
And then in 2020, January of 2020, my stepdad passed away. And that was, as we all know, when the pandemic hit. And so it
Mhm.
was 8 losses in those 6 years, and then the pandemic. And I found myself in 2020 still sitting there, basically holding my head, going, what are we doing? Like,
Wow.
how is this life? It's just so much grief.
Mhm.
Now, when you talk to my stepmom, when you talk to my mother, when you talk to my brother-in-law, they will say how strong and courageous I was during that, how I was helping
Mm.
plan these funerals, how I was balancing it all, juggling being in the hospital with my father, and he passed away in 2016. I was in the hospital every day with him for 4 months as he was sick, and getting my kids to their classes and their after school activities. And yeah, my family all thought like, you're Superwoman. And I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. I was just constantly humming with anxiety and grief, and I had nothing that was really filling me up anymore.
Mhm.
And so by July of 2020, really like doom scrolling in the middle of not knowing, we're in lockdown and not knowing what's going to happen next,
Yeah.
I happened to keep seeing these same ads for learn watercolor for free. There's
Yeah.
all these free tutorials, and just use whatever supplies you have. And I clicked on one and I decided to try it. And I sat down in July with, at the time, my youngest was, I guess she would have been about 11 or so. I sat down with her and we did one little watercolor like tutorial. And
Mhm.
she, it was a fun activity, but she wasn't sold. I, however, loved it. I just found myself like my breathing started to regulate again. My heart rate was normalizing. I was focusing on something beautiful and positive, but really that had no deliverable to the world. Nobody was demanding anything of me. There was nothing to fix, there was no problem to solve. I could just sit there and paint and find my body just rest again. And man, it became addictive. I found time to paint like once a week for the next month or so. And then I started
Uh-huh.
painting multiple times a week. And by the end of 2020, I was painting every day, all day long. I had a desk set up in our garage. And it was like I had come back into myself. So if you rewind back to who I was when I met my husband, I was a creative writing major, and I had
Okay.
hoped to be a writer someday. And I had done some blogging when our kids were really little, but life was busy and demanding,
Mm.
and it wasn't how I was able to focus a lot of my energy. And by the end of 2020, with all of that watercolor painting, I was so alive and energized again and full of creative ideas. I wanted to go back to grad school. So I started applying to grad schools,
Uh,
and I, within 15 months, finished my master's degree in writing. And I had
wow.
started the first 10,000 words of what is now my published novel. I graduated in 2022. I know that I was in such a lost place when I clicked on that ad,
Mhm.
but I will forever be grateful for how the simple act of watercolor really brought me back to myself. And life didn't stop being hard, but it
Yeah.
really renewed who I was and what was missing in my life.
What a great lesson. Did you ever watercolor or paint before? Or was that just kind
No,
of out of the blue
it
watercolor?
was, yeah, it was totally out of the blue. I had taken an arts and crafts class in my senior year of high school to fill in, an elective or whatever. I always considered myself crafty or like
Mhm.
a DIYer. I was a
Mhm.
Girl Scout leader and a MOPS mom and like do all these crafty things. But I
Yeah.
do have that grandmother that was the first to pass away in that series of deaths she had a dual master's in mathematics and fine art, and she was a very talented artist. My mom's twin
Okay.
sister was also an English teacher and an artist. And my stepsister, who
Oh,
lives in Minnesota, was an artist for a long time. So I was surrounded by artists and I was
yeah.
so in awe of them. But I always thought that if I didn't formally study it, then I couldn't be an artist. And
Yeah.
what I learned from those tutorials is no, you get those 10,000 hours, however you get those 10,000 hours, right? You put in the time and you learn the skills and you are an artist. You
Yeah.
you get to claim it.
Yeah.
You become it. You don't
I
have to.
am.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I could just feel the energy when you were talking about all the things that happened, the almost fight or flight, and then the watercolor. I
Mhm.
could just see you visibly just telling me about it, like relaxing. I love
Yes.
that. That's amazing.
And I've always been very just drawn to water also. I'm
Hmm.
a summer baby. I was a swimmer and I was a lifeguard in my high school years. I was always drawn to water. I happened to live at the beach at that time in 2020, like literally looking at the water.
Oh,
And
nice.
so to sit there and to literally paint with water was so natural to me to feel at ease. It was so clear that it was my medium, but I had just never realized it until then.
Yeah. I love too that you kept getting the little messages. Like I
Yeah.
firmly believe when we need to do something for ourselves or in our life, whatever it is, we get messages and we just have to see or hear them. Ladies, you know I believe midlife is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything. That's why I created the Courage and Confidence Hour, a monthly space just for us to connect, share, and shine. Here's what you can expect during this 3-month program. Each month, we'll gather on Zoom for an uplifting, heart centered hour that helps you quiet self doubt, find your voice, and build the kind of confidence that ripples into every area of your life. You'll leave each session feeling lighter, braver, and more energized to take on your next chapter. And the best part? You don't have to do it alone. You'll be surrounded by women who truly get it, who lift you up and remind you that you're not behind, you're right on time. We're kicking things off this October with a special beta launch at an introductory price, and I'd love for you to be a part of this founding circle. If you're ready to feel more connected, courageous, and confident in your everyday life, this is your invitation. Just click the link in the show notes to sign up and join us.
I absolutely agree. Whether people are faithful or not, I think the universe is trying to direct you towards what will
Yes.
bring you joy, where your best energy should be spent,
Yeah.
and how you can find the best experience in this one short life you get. And you just got to pay attention to those little signs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because eventually you'll have to listen. You have to do something.
Mhm.
I found that people who have all these, these things happen that are very stressful, eventually their body says, okay, something's got to give here and like physically something happened. So
Absolutely.
if you can start listening before that happens, it's much better.
Right. You know, when I was in college, I went through one really difficult episode and I started getting terrible migraines. And at one point, I had a migraine so bad that I couldn't unclench my fists and they thought I was having a stroke. And
Oh,
what it was is it was just really unprocessed stress that I was carrying and not finding a way to get, to get out of my body. And like I mentioned, life hasn't gotten any easier. In 9 days, I'm taking my 18-year-old literally across the country to school. And that's stressful. But we also lost my mother-in-law this year. We moved my mom out of her house from 26 years into, a house one-fourth the size just
oh.
in May. But what I have found is that my daily watercolor practice and my daily journaling, and when I'm able to really like focus in on a project, my writing in like really intense ways of writing,
Mhm.
it all is cleansing my body of that stress that I'm carrying from those activities that I need to respond to, that my family depends on me to respond to.
Right, right. Number one theme of all my guests is fill your own cup first, because you cannot take
Hmm.
care of anyone else until you do that.
I always thought that I was because I was, I have two dogs. I was walking the dogs every day. I was going to therapy. I was hanging out with those girlfriends and letting them hear all my complaining. None of it, though, none of it really served me the way that a creative outlet like watercolor did. And I think the thing is when I was in that fight or flight stage, I was retreating into myself, even in therapy, talking about it all the time, what was frustrating me. Yes, that's an outlet, but I was holding on to the experiences and sitting in them. And with my girlfriends, the same thing. When I was walking the dogs, I was sort of escaping by listening to podcasts or books. But the only thing that actually really cleansed my spirit of the stress was having a creative outlet that allowed me to really shine outward and really move from myself into the greater purpose of this world, which to me is like connecting with nature and spreading joy and really putting something beautiful into the world that only I could create, right? That as long as I was stuck inside of myself, none of that was happening. But the creative outlet really allowed me to focus outward and focus on positivity instead.
Oh, I love that so much. And I know a lot of women are dealing with aging parents.
Mhm.
And now I personally, my kids are grown and out of the house, which doesn't mean I don't have to worry about them, of course,
Of course.
but they're
Just
not
different demands.
a little different. Yeah, their problems are different. But anyway, so you are handling aging parents plus the teenage years. How in the
Mhm.
world? I'm so glad you have your watercolor because I don't know how people do that.
You know, I think there's a few keys to handling it. The first one is to really have that oxygen mask, whatever it is. So for me, it's watercolor. It's every day I go through certain activities that really help ground me and focus me and keep that positivity. So I start my day with journaling. I do daily drawing and watercolor exercises, and then I do the New York Times puzzles because I feel like that helps my brain
Yep.
just really, fire on all cylinders. And I think it sounds crazy to say it this way, but I love that line from Ted Lasso where he says, don't be judgmental, stay curious. And when it comes to both aging parents and our teenagers, I really have to go back to that a lot. It's really easy to get frustrated with teenagers who are making mistakes on a daily basis. That's how they're figuring out this world
That's
and
what they
where they
do.
belong in it. Yep. But if we just react with anger and frustration and we attack rather than coming at them with curiosity and wondering how they got to the conclusion they got to, how they made the decision they made, and how we can help them get out of the mess that they're in, I find that that's just such a much healthier approach with my children to keep that dialogue open and also to not feel like I need to be fixing them. Like they're not for me to fix. I'm just supposed to help them learn how to fix themselves, how to,
Yeah.
figure out these things in this world and navigate them. And sadly, My mom especially is in a stage in which she is like the reverse of a teenager. She's kind of going the opposite direction. She's making really impulsive decisions that are jeopardizing a lot of her future. And I've been put in charge of her finances. And I can get real frustrated and want to just attack in that mode as well. But when I stay curious, when I have the conversations with her, when I really listen more than I talk, I can hear in it that so much of it is coming from the loneliness of now having been a widow for 5 years and
Mhm.
how much she's had to give up in the last few years of her independence. And
Yeah.
so I think the best advice I have is to really stay curious and wherever possible, I'm lucky that my husband and I have a really close relationship, but wherever possible, to have a person that you can really just depend on to have your back when it feels like everybody at the world is coming at you, just to have a person who you can share with and who understands what you're going through. He is my rock. He gets
Mm.
me through all of this. And we still have we fell in love going to concerts way back in the 90s when
Yeah.
we first met. And we still go to concerts all the time. And that is like our
Nice.
outlet. That is just, we connect with music, or, we go to the House of Blues, we go to big festivals. And by
Nice.
doing that, we stay rooted in our relationship and in that fire that we, first were engulfed in when we, wild young love or whatever, that flame is still there by continuing to date one another and continuing to go to concerts. And so that really helps me to deal with the
Sure.
stress of the demands of teenagers and aging parents.
Yeah, it's nice to have that. It's like your best friend in that corner for with
Mhm.
you. Yeah. I kind of had to rediscover
100%.
that. Yeah, my husband, I mean, he retired a few years ago, and so that transition has been interesting.
Oh,
But
I
now
bet.
that yeah, now that these things are coming up with parents and whatever anything, it's like, oh yeah, you're here for me too. We're together. We can
Mm.
get through this. I love that you mentioned that too. So what kind of music do you guys like? I'm just curious.
We listened to a lot of punk rock, but we
Oh, okay.
also, so yeah, when we first started dating, we would go see, we're Southern California, so there was a lot of pop punk in the 90s. That's when No Doubt came out. We would
Oh,
go
okay.
see Social Distortion, and the Vandals are from here. And but we
Okay.
also really love more like alternative rock and like more folksy music. So, and our
Oh, cool.
girls really enjoy that with us. So, for
Nice.
example, we just went a few weeks ago to Denver because one of our bucket list venues was to go to Red Rocks, and
Mhm.
Mumford and Sons was playing at Red Rocks. And so we went as a family to see
Oh,
Mumford and Sons. We love the Lumineers. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Very cool.
wide,
I always
wide
ask.
variety.
Yeah, that's cool. We got our girls into REO Speedwagon and all the 80s
Hmm.
bands. So,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
it definitely if you have kids, you get them interested in your music because then you'll have something that you can all kind of relate to together. It does help.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our girls they'll go with us to punk shows, but they don't like the punk scene as much. But
Uh-huh.
our youngest, she happens to love Stevie Nicks, for example. And we have concerts
Oh,
here at the pier every Wednesday night. And like she knows all of the Stevie Nicks cover songs that what they're playing at the
oh,
cover
cool.
bands. And so yeah, and she and I love the Eagles. My husband doesn't like the
Oh,
Eagles, but
oh my gosh,
we
yeah.
totally connect on the Eagles. So if they don't love yours, you can find another genre maybe that you
Yeah.
both can connect on.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we are huge Eagles fans too, so there we got that in common. Very cool. Well, we kind of got off topic a little bit, but it kind of relates. So,
Well, I think music is one of those creative outlets as well. I will never be a talented musician. I love that our oldest daughter plays guitar and sings and writes
nice.
music, but it was always something that I dreamed of. But I think
Yeah.
even just the act of singing along with music that really moves your soul can help get you out of those ruts too. So
Yeah, for
it's not
sure.
that far off topic.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, one of my last guests actually, she started just singing to herself to kind of help deal with what she had going on. So she said, it just makes
Mhm.
me feel better. So I just sing. Like, good for you.
Yes. Yeah.
It's awesome.
as a writer, there's the reference to like rage on a page to just really like just get it all
Yeah.
out and as write as long and as hard and say all the evil, horrible things that you would never want the rest of the world to hear or know, but get it
Yeah.
out, rage on a page, and then you rip it up or you light it on fire and get rid of
And it's
it.
gone.
But listening to loud music that you can scream along to
Hmm.
or music that you love to dance to and really just turning it up loud and moving in your living room and dancing, all of those are great ways to
Yeah.
really, yeah, deal
Great
with some
coping
big feelings.
mechanisms.
Hmm.
Awesome. So, Jamie, do you sell your watercolors or what are you doing with that aspect of your life?
I do sell watercolors. I mostly turn them into things like stationery and stickers and share them that way on my
Mhm.
webpage. I really wanted to focus on staying engaged with my kids during these last couple of years of high school, especially,
Yeah.
and being able to have time for writing. So I don't take commissioned art, although I do donate commissioned art for pet portraits to local organizations
Oh,
like the girls basketball program. I'll donate a couple pet portraits for them every year and they auction them off. And so I do that and I sell some prints. I sell some of my note cards and things and
oh,
on my
cool.
website. And then my book is also available on my website. My book came out in
Yeah,
January.
I want to talk about that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I really wanted that was a life dream of mine. I had always had that goal. And as I was really being inspired by the watercolor and getting back into myself, my girls were becoming teenagers at that point, and I really felt like I needed to accomplish this dream of mine because as my sister who had ALS passed away at age 50, I saw that the last 7 years of her life as she got sick and deteriorated, those dreams of hers didn't get to be accomplished. She was a wonderful wife and mother, which I think were her biggest dreams for herself, but a lot of her personal goals got set aside and the illness really robbed her of the opportunity to ever fulfill them. So I didn't want to get to the end of my life and say that. I wanted to write that book and I wanted to show my daughters that I could do it even when life
Yeah.
was hard because I wanted them to believe that their dreams could be possible no matter what life threw at them. And then as I started to write it, I was really inspired by what it was like to engage with teenagers on a daily basis. And I was taken back at the same time, as we often do. We look at our kids in the modern era and we think, well, was it like when I was a teenager? And so I was taken back to what it was like to be a teenager in the 90s. And I was sort of comparing like how similar the experiences are. And really, there's so many similarities. Yes, we didn't have cell phones that were very prevalent and we didn't have social media, but so many of the issues that teenagers deal with now were the same ones that we were dealing with then in terms of, self-esteem and body dysmorphia issues, in terms of sexual consent, in terms of the abortion issue. Like Planned Parenthoods were getting bombed in the 90s also. There has been this debate that we have not been able to answer as a society for a very long time. And I wanted to show my girls that I did understand where they were coming from by writing this fictional story and surrounding, this main character's story with all the pop culture of the 90s that I loved. There is a lot of music in there. There's a lot of fun stuff. In 1996, when the story is set, is when the Olympics were in Atlanta
Yeah.
and when the movie Independence Day came out, and it was a huge blockbuster hit, and
Mhm.
those kinds of things. I call the book Absorbed because she actually is a lifeguard, like I was, and she does watercolor to get through some of the trauma that she experiences.
Mm,
So I did draw on those personal experiences, but the
sure.
story is much more like Clueless meets Baywatch at the community pool. There's just it's very young teenagers being dumb. And yeah, Stacy Chapman is the main character and she
Mhm.
ends up working with one of her crushes and getting into all sorts of trouble, and it's
Okay.
about her figuring out how to get through it.
So if people are interested in reading that, they can grab it from your website, I'm guessing.
They can absolutely grab it from my website. It's also available on all the regular places where you can get
Sure.
books like, you know, Barnes and Noble and Amazon. I really am a big advocate for local mom and pop bookstores, independent bookstores,
Yes,
as well as libraries. And you can always go and request it from one of those to keep them on main streets across America because
for
that's so
sure.
important for our small
Yeah,
towns.
that's what I encourage everyone to do. If they don't have it already, they will order it for you. So just
Exactly.
don't be afraid to ask. So I love
And that
that.
supports me too. Even the library, you don't
Yeah.
realize it, but the authors are very well supported by the libraries as well.
Oh,
So
good, good. Yeah. So what is your website so people know where to find
it's
you?
jamietownsend.com, and that's Jamie like Jaime, Jaime, Townsend, Townzen. I am also on all the social media. Jamie Gets Creative and Jamie Townsend. So you can find me. I share a lot of the concerts we go to. I share my art. I share about the book. There's a book trailer that my daughter, who just graduated high school, was in film and television, and she had some
Ah.
brilliant kids in her class that are going to be, I know, Oscar-winning filmmakers someday that
Oh,
made
cool.
the trailer. So if you want to get a taste of what the book is like, you can see that on either my social media pages or my webpage too.
Okay. Maybe she'll make a movie out of it,
Oh,
or
that
they
would be
will.
amazing. I
Wouldn't that be
love
fun?
it. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So are you thinking more books in the future?
I am. Yeah, I have one that I've really been brewing over for a while. Unfortunately, my mom was taken advantage of by some really terrible scammers and
Mm.
lost the bulk of her retirement money. So that's how I ended
Oh,
up
no.
managing her finances and part of why she had to move this year. But I've really wanted to dive into what leads someone down the path to be that kind of a person who does that. Because we often only think about the victim, and obviously the victim will be, an important part of my story as well. But I'm really curious about how someone ends up making that their way of earning a living in this world
Oh,
by
wow.
by crushing people's lives. And so it'll be a dark subject to spend a lot of time in by comparison with my more fun 90s teenage sort of rom-commy book.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important one. So
Oh,
I've
definitely.
I've been dwelling on it for a while, and once my oldest is settled in her dorm, I plan to really spend some time building out those characters in that
Yeah.
book.
That's such a great topic because I mean, I don't know how many times I've said, why don't these people just get normal jobs?
Hmm.
But I love that you're
Yeah.
getting curious about it, like you mentioned earlier too, and just kind of figuring that out. So,
Sadly, the most evil people in this world were not born that way. They
no.
were led down that path, and I
Yeah.
think we don't want to understand why someone like Jeffrey Dahmer did what he did or the Unabomber did what he did, but I think it would help us to bring an end to these scammers if we can understand how they get there in the first place.
Yeah. Go to the root of the problem, which is applicable to
Upstream,
so many
yes.
things.
Yes,
So
for
many
sure.
things. Oh my gosh. So yeah, so you're taking your oldest to college. That's going to be fun.
Oh, I'm Kim, I am just so full of joy and excitement that she had this big goal for herself and she made it happen for herself. And I'm so
Yeah.
proud of her. And then I'm also like on a daily basis a weepy mess because
Yep.
my baby girl will be too far away from me to hug when she's having a bad day. And like I've got to
Yeah.
connect with over, FaceTime and only see her every few months. And
Yeah.
yeah, our whole guest bedroom is covered in just piles of
Oh.
suitcases and luggage and piles of laundry that's got to be packed in them. And
Oh my gosh. Oh, so many fun things. It'll all be
yes,
okay. It'll all be fine. But yeah,
yes,
I know
yes.
that. I know that transition isn't always fun, but
No, well,
it'll be okay. It's
it's
like bittersweet kind of thing.
exactly if we've done our job well as parents, our
Yes.
kids will be strong enough to leave us. And so
Yes. And I don't
you
like that.
I know, but they'll also love us so much that they'll want to come back on multiple occasions.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So before we say goodbye, Jamie, do you have any one last message or nugget of knowledge for our listeners?
My last advice would just be, in sort of a recap of what I shared before. Life is short. You only get one chance on this in this experience, and really to spend it doing something that only you can do, that brings you joy and spreads joy in this world. Whatever it is, find a way to do it. I'm not saying you have to quit your job. I'm not saying you have to totally turn your life upside down, For me, watercolor started with 15 minutes a day, and that 15 minutes changed my life and the way that I look at this world and the way that I move through it forever. So just consider how that little shift in your time can really make such a huge difference for yourself, no matter what you're going through.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Jamie, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I hope I get to talk to you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. If you liked what you heard, I would love it if you would leave a review, or even better, send a link of this episode to a friend. And don't forget that you can join my Flourishing After 40 Facebook group for free. It's a great community of women like you who are ready to live courageously right now. So until next time, take care of your beautiful self.